Hi, I'm Steve, and welcome to the podcast Today Stuff with Steve. And I'm sitting across the table from Kaleea. How are you today?
I'm good, Steve. How are you?
I'm wonderful.
That's awesome.
Yeah, and we got John Green in the corner on the sound and Mason over here on the camera.
Yep.
And they're smiling away.
Our star video production team.
Yes, yes, they are, such as that. So, Kaleea, what are we going to talk about today?
Man, we're actually going to be talking about kind of a somber topic today. We're going to be talking about suicide and what Christians believe about suicide and how to respond to people who are kind of grappling with the hard questions that it brings up.
Wow. Yeah, that is a difficult topic, right? And not one that we frequently talk about.
No, not at all.
Yeah, why do you think it is that maybe we don't talk about it much?
Kind of avoid or skirt it. I mean, I think that it's a hurtful topic for a lot of people. I mean, a lot of us know someone who's either struggling with mental illness or know someone who's committed suicide. And so I think it hits home for a lot of people. And a lot of the times we don't know how to comfort those people. Right.
I think you're absolutely right. And there's maybe a stigmatism, right, to talking about mental health things, which I think is unfortunate today. And
right.
Yeah, it feels like from my age perspective that people have gotten a little bit over the hump of, hey, we can talk about certain kind of mental health things, whether it's depression or suicide or something similar.
Yeah, right. Mental health is a very touchy topic, especially in some spiritual communities where it's not viewed as a medical issue, and there's not always the most sensitivity when we talk about those things. So
yeah, good point.
Yeah.
So in thinking about different denominations of churches, often through church history, maybe have had different viewpoints about suicide. Yeah. So what have you learned about it recently?
Yeah. So I've learned recently that the whole suicide in some way forfeits your salvation is actually rooted in Catholicism. They wouldn't do burials in the Catholic Church for people who committed suicide, and that it's treated as such. And biblically it's treated as a murder, even though you're doing it to yourself. Obviously, Scripture is clear about us being made in the image of God, Imago Dei, and that needing to be respected, but doesn't necessarily mean that your salvation is forfeited if it happens. But some denominations believe that, so it's interesting.
Yeah, I was telling you before that in some of the movies I've watched, people go, I didn't commit suicide, at least in the movie, because I'm Catholic.
Right.
Yeah, they're...
It's interesting.
They're so afraid that they, anyway, didn't...
Yeah. Didn't even go there.
In the movie.
Right.
Yeah, that's different,
Yeah.
Yeah, I think the Catholicisms divide sins up into venal sins and mortal sins, right?
Yeah.
Yeah, I was thinking about it today and I thought, well, maybe a good way to think of that in understanding Catholicism is that there's misdemeanors and felonies. You don't want to commit a felony.
That's good. Yeah.
Right?
A misdemeanor.
Yeah, I might get a fine and don't do that again.
Right.
But a felony, you're going to forfeit something.
Yeah, you're going to pay for that.
Yeah, you're going to pay for that.
Yeah.
Yeah. So I think the mortal, say I get it mixed up all the time.
Right.
Mortal is you deliberately did something that was so egregious that we're kicking you out of the swimming pool. You're out of the family, so to speak.
Right. Yeah. And then the venial are the white lies of sin.
Right. Yeah. So there's people often go to those categories, but it seems like to me sin is sin.
Sin is sin.
Whether if you deliberately, knowingly
do it,
right?
Yeah, or you unknowingly do it, it's still sin.
It's still sin. Yeah. So I think that Catholic, and then I was reading that Augustine, that was an issue in his era, some 1,500 years ago, that certain people, if I kill myself, I get to go to heaven sooner.
Oh,
okay.
Interesting.
That's just the thought
I just want to go be with Jesus.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And he's saying, hey, no, don't do that. Or else, and kind of swung the pendulum so far over that.
Oh, okay. To there's going to be eternal consequences for that decision.
Yeah, kind of a detriment.
An overcorrection.
Way overcorrection, right? In some form or fashion, yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
Huh, interesting.
Yeah, so I don't think Protestant. So I grew up Methodist, a Protestant church, but I don't remember any discussion about that wasn't part of Protestant tradition
at all.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
Wow. So what did you think of suicide when you were coming up?
Well, I don't remember anyone when I was growing up that I was aware of or knew that committed suicide. Maybe if I put more thought into it, I could think of somebody, but I think it's become more prevalent in my lifetime.
Yeah.
And maybe it's just because I'm older and more I've lived that I've seen, I know of people who have committed suicide.
Right.
Yeah. And like you said, it's very traumatizing to family members and friends to have that experience in your background.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, I think, suicide rates have increased, right, over the last 50 years. So we're seeing it more as young people. I know of a lot of people who've actually taken their own lives, or know of people who know people who've taken their own lives. So I think, we're obviously dealing with a mental health crisis like we've never have before. Mm-hmm.
So what are, in your opinion, for your age group, what are the responses to people who have depression or suicidal thoughts?
Well, I want to say that the response now is probably better than it was when you were coming up because of the stigmatization. I think there's a lot of destigmatization that's happening in conversations because we want people to get help. So I think a lot of the times people are referred to therapy or to talk to someone that they're close to and trust. There's a national suicide hotline that you can call if you're in a crisis. And I want to say that sometimes the world's response to those things might be better than the church's response, and not wanting to deal with it at all or avoiding it because it's awkward. But I think there's a lot of resources, at least out there, that people have.
Right. And it may be in churches we might have the belief that, hey, Christians shouldn't do that. We're this false impression we're perfect.
Right.
And if we would admit to depression or suicide, then we might be admitting that we're not perfect. We're not perfect,
yeah.
right? So that could be a difficulty.
Yeah, we're defective in some way.
Yeah. So I think this has become more of an issue since COVID.
Yeah.
Right? That we talk about suicide prevention and those kinds of things. And early on, when I was a pastor, I used to think, don't ask anybody if they're thinking about suicide, because I might put the thought into their head.
Like trigger it, right.
And then I went to a little bitty seminar on it, and they said, no, that's the exact opposite. You should be asking. All of a sudden, I wasn't afraid to ask people, hey, are you struggling with depression? I wasn't afraid to
say something. Yeah, because I think a lot of times people feel so invisible. And so it's like, if you can't even acknowledge that I might be struggling with depression, then it continues to perpetuate that thinking, oh, I really am invisible. I'm struggling so much and they can't even see me. So being able to vocalize that you see someone, I think makes a big difference.
That makes a lot of sense.
Yeah.
And so there have been times I've asked people, hey, how depressed are you? And I try to get a handle on that.
Yeah.
Scale of 1 to 10, or do you sleep at night? Are you eating? I'm just trying to ask basic questions.
Right.
And trying to get a feel for that.
To kind of gauge. Yeah.
Yeah. So just asking those questions. Have you thought about hurting yourself? That's a hard question to ask. It's a little scary.
It is.
Because what if they say yes?
Yeah, then you have to respond, right? Yeah.
Right. Yeah.
Yeah. So how do you respond to someone who tells you that they're having those thoughts?
Well, sometimes I have taken people to the emergency room.
Okay.
Or to a clinic, or I've got them in, suggested they go see their family doctor. So I've actually driven people to a medical clinic before.
Wow.
Because I just get so concerned. So I think that's one option.
Yeah.
And there's an organization in our community called Cahoots.
Okay.
Which is a good resource. So they're kind of like the mental health crises organization on wheels. And they'll show up and they'll just drive over.
Yeah, to de-escalate.
And they're trained at those kinds of things.
Right.
And they get funding from the local government, and they provide that service throughout our community.
Cool.
But I don't think every community has that
No,
resource.
they don't. I've brought that up in other places when visiting, and people were like, I've never heard of that. So
yeah.
I don't know where it got started. Maybe here.
Eugene?
In Eugene,
Yes,
really?
it did.
Wow.
And other communities have tried to copy cahoots.
Wow.
Because often the fire department or the police might have to respond to those calls.
Right.
But that may not be in their
their training,
in their lane,
to know how to respond to that.
So they bring in cahoots who can respond well and spend a lot of time with people.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that's awesome.
Yeah. Mm-hmm. I think one of the good things that we can always think about is we can always try to help people get connected to those resources.
Yeah.
And connected to some other people.
Right. Mm-hmm.
Yeah, and the church
try and surround them.
Yeah, and it seemed to me the church ought to be the place for that.
Yeah, it ought to be. The church is where the people are. Yeah,
so it ought to be people in the church who are responding to those who are hurting and discouraged and depressed.
Yeah, right. So what are some practical things do you think we could look out for, or warning signs in someone that might be struggling with suicidal thoughts?
Oh, that is a great question. I think when you ask and you get an answer, that obviously is a sign. If their behavior's just very different. Mm-hmm. There's a unusual, tangible difference in their behavior. And if you have any, I'm going to call it spidey sense, like Spider-Man, that, hey, something's off here, it's better to ask.
That's good. Yeah.
Right. Mm-hmm. I mean, if you know somebody well and then they're, hey, that's a little off, they seem a little down and depressed, I think that's really, you speak up at that point.
Right. Yeah. No, that's good. That's good.
I think lack of sleep is something you can ask people. Are you sleeping? Are you eating? Stuff like that.
Right. Yeah. No, those are good questions. And then if they say they're not doing any of those things, your next response is to point them to resources, right? And point them to people. And sometimes it means getting behind your wheel and driving someone somewhere, right?
Very much so,
yeah.
Yeah. And so sometimes in churches, referring people to counselors, sometimes that's used to be a stigma that we're not going to do that, but I'm all for it. I think I view counseling as discipleship, so to speak. And if I can get people into a counselor, help that process, I'm quick to do that. Yeah.
Well, maybe that's a good talking point. How do we destigmatize therapy as Christians, and why do you kind of think that stigma is there?
That's a good question. I think the stigma sometimes is that Christians ought to be happy all the time, and that's a myth. Yeah, it's true. Right? I ought to be joyful, and I ought to be a certain way, and I'm not. So therefore, there's something wrong with me, and that simply is not the case. I'm not happy all the time. Right. And if I go get therapy, people are going to think there's something wrong with me. There's something wrong with me. Yeah. But maybe we all just say, hey, let's all go to therapy. That way that's why it's normal. All destigmatized. Yeah. We all need therapy. There's actually a hoodie called, it says Jesus plus therapy on it. I should buy it for myself. Yeah. But right, like God puts resources on earth for us to use in the same way that you're going to go to your doctor if you have some legitimate medical condition. Your mental health is a part of your health, and that needs to be treated in a holistic way. Yeah, if I break my arm, I go to the doctor to have that mended, right? So if my emotions are struggling, I go to the doctor for that. Right, exactly. Right? And no one's going to look at you crazy because you went and got a cast for your arm. Correct. Right. Yeah. That's why I like to use the word for Christians. Hey, counseling is like discipleship, because I hope that resonates with people. Yeah. Oh, we're just trying to spiritually grow, and this is helping me to make that progress, that spiritual growth. Right, exactly. So if counseling is like discipleship, then we can kind of remove the stigma from it and treat it in the same way that you would with meeting up with a pastor or a small group leader and talking about your emotions with that person. Yeah, so that's why I often phrase it, hey, let's get some discipleship. It's going to a counselor who can help you in that particular area. That's awesome. I think that's really helpful to people. I think so too. I think that's a good tidbit. Yeah. Yeah. One of the things that I've rarely done, but it's happened to me a time or two, I'll ask people, this is pretty standard stuff. Hey, well, how are you going to hurt yourself? And follow up with that question. And if they have a plan, then I'm like, oh, well, this is immediate. Like, well, I'm going to go home and do whatever. Yeah. Then I'm, that's pretty well something that they've thought about it and they're going to plan it. And then, so intervention is really needed.
Yeah, definitely. And do we have some kind of crisis response for people here at Grace Community?
Well, what we try to do is quickly refer people to counseling and get them the kind of help they need, whether that's Cahoots, the hospital, their medical doctor, or something like that. And then we do have people who are in that care ministry, but we know that suicide is probably beyond most people's training. So we're quick to refer people and even take them to those services.
No, that's awesome. Yeah. That's really cool.
When I have people tell me, I'm going to go home and take a bottle of pills, I go to their house with them and take away all the pills.
Good. Yeah.
Or I had somebody, I asked them, well, do you have any guns in the house? And men are more likely to use firearms for suicide. Women more likely, at least I've read, are pills. So I've actually taken firearms away from people with their consent. Obviously, anyway, hey, maybe I should take that with me. Yeah, maybe you should.
I don't think you need that.
Yeah, I don't think you need that. I'll take it. And then I've given them back in a year or two later. I just keep them for
a year or two.
Wow. Well, just to do that.
Just to make sure.
I don't want that.
Better safe than sorry.
Exactly.
Yeah. You brought up the men and women thing. In that book I was reading, they said that men are actually 3 times more likely to commit, and then women are 3 times more likely to attempt to commit. So I thought that was interesting statistic. Why do you think it's like that?
Well, it could be, to be gruesome about it, when you're going to shoot yourself, it's more permanent than taking pills, maybe. If men are more likely to use firearms.
Men are more likely to commit suicide overall, 3 times more likely.
Oh, okay.
Yeah. So why do you think there's the gender gap?
I don't know. What do you think?
I think.
Do you have an answer for that?
I think there's a stigma. There's a stigma on mental health in general, but there's even more of a stigma for men to come forward with their emotions when they're struggling with something. So I think that is a big part of it, is that they just don't feel comfortable, or they feel like they're going to be a burden to someone, or they don't feel like people can carry the weight of their emotions. And that's just not true. If you're watching, you should know that that's not true. Yeah, exactly. And it seems like, to me, I'm curious what you think, that I think people your age talk about it far more than people my age. Yeah, we do. So I think it's maybe a little bit easier to talk about, but yet it seems like people who are older usually are more likely to try to commit suicide. Am I correct with that? I didn't know that.
Okay.
Yeah, I'm not sure, but that is interesting. And I wonder if it's from the weight of feeling like they don't have anyone to talk to, and because they are older and they're carrying more. So that's interesting. But I know youth suicides are always going up. They went down during COVID, which is, you would think it would have done the opposite, which is interesting. I wonder if that had to do with kids being like at home with their families more. But yeah, it's a scary thing.
I think one of the things too that I was reading is that one of the things that we can do for people is to follow up. You have that conversation and you maybe pointed them some resources, but then follow up. Hey, did you contact that counselor? Did you go to your medical doctor? Right. Just that follow up.
Did you get that? Did you talk about that? Did you get that looked into or checked up on in the same way that you would ask somebody who has some other like physical condition? Did you get that checked up on? And do the same thing concerning mental health. Yeah.
Exactly. One of the things I try to, this sounds like I'm tricking people, but let's go to your medical doctor. Maybe there's some medical things going on. If I can at least get them into a medical doctor, because they often have people fill out a questionnaire. And they say, well, I'm concerned you're depressed. So let's talk about that. Let's talk about that. Yeah. But I got them in there thinking that, well, maybe there's a chemical thing going on. Oh yeah, maybe there is. I'll go see my, Yeah. So it's kind of like trying to get them in to see someone through the back door.
See someone. Yeah.
See someone.
Right. Yeah. No, I think that's a wise tactic, because your doctor is going to refer you to therapy anyway. So, and if you get it from your doctor, then you might be more likely to listen. And yeah, that's good.
And I think maybe there are some people who are a little bit against taking antidepressant medication.
Yeah.
But I'm like, hey, if it's helping you, let's do that.
Mm-hmm.
Let's not shy away from getting
the help you need.
Right.
Yeah.
So in the church, it would seem like, hey, we want to have these conversations and make sure people feel safe to have those conversations.
Yeah.
And verbalize them in their community group or with some other friend at church, right?
Right. Yeah. Please talk to someone. Mm-hmm.
Yeah, exactly.
There are people who want to listen.
Yes, very much so.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And maybe, I think you even said people don't want to be a burden, so they don't bring it up.
Yeah.
But they're not being a burden.
You're not being a burden. Yeah. It would be more burdensome to lose you than to have you here talking with us about your emotions.
Yeah. I found it interesting, and I think you read the same thing I did, that there are examples of suicide in the Bible.
Yeah. Yeah.
Do you remember who some of those were?
Yeah. King Saul, who fell on his own sword. And then the guy that was in Absalom's army that was going against David, who was that?
Zimri, I think was his name.
Yeah.
I think.
And then Judas, of course. It's the most famous one. And then it kind of juxtaposed Samson's death and said that wasn't suicide. He died a heroic death in bringing down the pillars for his people. Mm-hmm. But yeah, I thought that was interesting because we kind of gloss over those passages and don't really think about the parallel to today. But it's crazy. The Bible has everything in it and has an answer for us. So yeah, it was interesting.
Yeah. To circle back to the kind of one of the questions I think often they committed suicide, they can't go to heaven. And I would say, well, every sin is forgivable.
Right.
Is when Jesus died for you on the cross, and if he knows everything, he knew that was going to happen. He knew that was going to happen, right?
He covers a multitude of sin.
Yeah. And I think parents of children or others, they need to be at least have that kind of comfort and consolation.
You need to find solace in that. Yeah.
That's not the blasphemy of the Holy Spirit.
Right. Yeah. It's not the unforgivable sin.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah, good way to say that.
Yeah.
Okay. Well, tough topic for today. You have any last closing thoughts about that?
No, just if you're struggling with mental health, please reach out to somebody.
Yep. And I agree.
Thank you for listening.